The autumn sun spilled through the windows of Holloway's pages like honey, warming the spines of 1,000 stories waiting to be told. Beckett Holloway stood in the children's section, a copy of Charlotte's Web in his hands, breathing in that familiar scent of old paper impossibility that had been his sanctuary for 8 years. His daughter Wren sat cross-legged in the reading corner, organizing picture books by color. She was 8 years old and had her mother's eyes. Sometimes when the light hit her face a certain way, Beckett had to look away because the resemblance was too much to bear. 3 years. 3 years since Celeste died. 3 years since a drunk driver ran a red light and took everything from them in the space of a single heartbeat. Beckett still wore his wedding ring. He couldn't take it off. Some mornings he would twist it around his finger and pretend she was just in the other room, making coffee, humming that song she loved. The bookstore door flew open with such force that Beckett dropped the book. A little girl burst through like a hurricane, wild-eyed and desperate. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with tangled brown hair and a face streaked with barely contained tears. She ran straight to Beckett and grabbed his flannel shirt with both fists, clutching the fabric like he was the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. "Mister, please, can you pretend to be my mommy's date?" Beckett stood frozen. "It's a huge emergency. My grandma and grandpa are trying to make my mom marry a really boring man who only talks about golf. And I heard them say they might take me away from her if she doesn't find someone soon." The words tumbled out at 100 miles an hour, each one more frantic than the last. "Please, I'm not kidding. Please." Wren looked up from her books, eyes wide. "Dad, I think that girl needs help. Like, really needs help." Beckett knelt down to the child's level, his father's instinct kicking in despite his confusion. He had learned in 3 years of solo parenting that when a child is scared, you get on their level. You make yourself small. You listen. "Okay, slow down. What's your name? Where's your mom?" The little girl took a shuddering breath. "My name's Juniper, but everyone calls me Junie. My mom, Marlo, is at the cafe next door with Grandpa Douglas and Grandma Vivian. They're my dad's parents. My dad, Everett, died 2 years ago." She said it matter-of-factly, the way children learn to say impossible things after they've said them enough times. "And now they brought this man named Preston, who was Daddy's friend from college. He's so boring. He talks about golf for like 1,000,000 hours." Juniper's lip trembled. "But that's not the worst part. I heard Grandma tell Grandpa that Mom can't handle raising me alone, that they need to step in." And Mom started crying. "She tries to hide it, but I always know when she's crying." Beckett felt something crack open in his chest. He knew that cry. The one you muffle into your pillow at night so your child won't hear. The one that escapes anyway. Before he could respond, the bookstore door opened again. A woman rushed in, face flushed with embarrassment, breath coming in quick gasps. "Juniper Ann Thatcher, you do not run away from the table like that." She turned to Beckett, mortified. "I am so sorry, sir. She's been watching too many romantic comedies. We're leaving right now." Marlo Thatcher was somewhere in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that was coming loose, and glasses slightly askew like she'd been adjusting them all morning. She had the kind of beauty that didn't need effort, though everything about her posture screamed exhaustion. Beckett knew that posture. He saw it in his own mirror on the hard days. Juniper ducked behind Beckett like he was a shield. "Mom, please listen. I found someone who can pretend to be your boyfriend so Grandma and Grandpa will stop trying to make you date boring Preston." And then Beckett saw it. The gold wedding band on Marlo's left hand. Still there. 2 years after her husband died. He looked down at his own hand, at Celeste's ring, still circling his finger after 3 years. Their eyes met. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition that needed no words. "Oh, you carry someone with you too. You understand." Through the bookstore window, Beckett spotted an older couple walking toward the shop. Beside them was a man in a polo shirt who appeared to be explaining something with great enthusiasm, probably about golf. Marlowe's face went pale when she saw them approaching. Not fear, something worse. The look of someone who simply cannot endure one more interrogation about why they haven't moved on yet. Beckett didn't know what made him say it. Maybe it was the desperate hope in Juniper's eyes. Maybe it was the way Marlowe looked like she was drowning in plain sight. Maybe it was because he remembered how it felt when well-meaning people asked him if he was dating yet, as if grief had an expiration date. "How long do you need me to be your date?" Marlowe's jaw dropped. "Excuse me, what?" Beckett shrugged, trying to seem casual about the most insane thing he'd ever offered. "Your daughter asked for help. I'm offering. How long do we need to sell this?" Juniper's entire face transformed with hope. "Just lunch. They're buying. Please, mister, please." Wren appeared at Beckett's side. "Dad, can I come too? I want to help. Also, I've never seen you on a date before. This sounds interesting." Beckett looked at his daughter, at the curiosity in her eyes. Wren had never seen him with anyone except her mother. The thought of it made his throat tight. Marlowe glanced at the approaching figures, then back at Beckett, then at her daughter's pleading face. She made a choice. "Okay, fine. Yes, thank you. We'll explain everything later." And then she grabbed Beckett's hand and plastered on a smile that was only slightly manic, right as Douglas and Vivian Thatcher walked through the door. The next hour was the strangest of Beckett's entire life. They walked next door to the cafe, where Preston Whitmore was waiting with the confused expression of a man whose role had suddenly been rewritten. Douglas and Vivian Thatcher were in their late 60s, impeccably dressed with the polished manners of people who had expectations. They had questions. So many questions. What did Beckett do for a living? How long had he owned the bookstore? Was the business stable? What were his long-term plans? Beckett answered everything while Marlowe squeezed his hand under the table, her grip tightening whenever the questions veered too personal. But something strange happened as they talked. Beckett and Marlowe began spinning a story about how they met. At the library, the Salem Public Library where Marlowe worked. "I go there every few weeks," Beckett said, "to borrow business books I can't afford to buy." "I noticed him because he always picked interesting titles," Marlowe added. "Most people just grab bestsellers, but he'd spend an hour in the economics section, really thinking about what he wanted." They looked at each other and realized with a jolt that they weren't making this up. Beckett did go to that library. Marlowe did work there. They had seen each other dozens of times, as strangers who never spoke, orbiting the same spaces without ever colliding. 60% of the story they were inventing was actually true. They had noticed each other. They just never knew it mattered. At the end of the table, Wren and Juniper sat together like they'd been friends for years instead of minutes. They whispered and giggled and exchanged glances that seemed to carry entire conversations. Juniper turned to Preston with the politeness of a child who had been taught manners but was about to deliver a devastating blow. "Mr. Preston, do you have any hobbies besides golf? My mom likes books and hiking and baking cookies. Golf seems kinda lonely." Preston stammered something incomprehensible. Wren covered her mouth to hide her smile. By the time lunch ended, Preston had excused himself. And Douglas and Vivian seemed cautiously satisfied that Marlowe had found someone. Douglas pulled Beckett aside before leaving. "I don't know you," he said quietly, "but my daughter-in-law has been through hell raising Juniper alone. My son Everett was everything to her. If you're serious about this, you better treat them right." His voice cracked slightly on his son's name. "We're watching." It wasn't a threat. It was the fear of a man who had buried his only child and couldn't bear to lose anything else. Beckett felt the weight of deception settle on his shoulders. "I understand, sir." After the Thatchers drove away, Marlowe collapsed against the bookstore wall, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. I can't believe we just did that. I'm so sorry for dragging you into my complete mess of a life. Beckett leaned against the wall beside her. For what it's worth, that was the most excitement I've had in 3 years. Marlowe laughed. It sounded slightly hysterical. They've been on me for months about dating. Ever since Everett died, they've been convinced I can't handle single parenting. They keep texting, calling, showing up with suggestions. Her voice dropped. Lately, they've started mentioning lawyers, reviewing custody arrangements. She wrapped her arms around herself. I'm terrified they actually will. Beckett thought of Wren, of what it would feel like if someone tried to take her. The thought made his blood run cold. That's rough. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. Juniper burst through the bookstore door. Mom, can Wren come over sometime? We both like the same books and she's really cool. Wren was right behind her. Dad, can Juniper come to our place? Please? Beckett and Marlowe looked at each other over the heads of their daughters and started laughing, because somehow in the space of one ridiculous afternoon, their children had become best friends. If you ever need a fake boyfriend again for in-law management purposes, Beckett said, surprising himself, I'm apparently your guy. Marlowe smiled. For the first time, it reached her eyes. I'll keep that in mind. 3 weeks later, Beckett had seen Marlowe and Juniper 9 times. Every single meeting was supposedly a coincidence. Juniper would suddenly need a book the library didn't have. Marlowe would bring her to Holloway's Pages. Wren would desperately need to return a library book in person. Beckett would drive her to the library. Every time the two girls would exchange glances like secret agents executing a mission. One evening, Beckett caught Wren typing furiously on her tablet, grinning like a cat with a secret. Bug, what are you doing? Wren flipped the tablet face down. Homework. On a tablet? You don't have homework on a tablet. Dad, it's the modern age. Everything is digital now. He let it go, but he started to suspect. The coincidences continued. Coffee after work, Sunday dinners, homework dates at the library where the girls sat together while the adults talked. Beckett found himself looking forward to these meetings more than anything else in his week. Marlowe got his jokes about obscure books. She didn't think it was weird that he sometimes reread middle-grade novels because the stories were pure. She understood the particular loneliness of raising a child alone. One Saturday, Marlowe began helping with story time at the bookstore. She read to the children gathered in the reading corner, her voice warm and alive with each character. Wren sat in the front row, mesmerized. Afterwards, she found Beckett behind the counter. Dad, she reads stories like Mom used to, like the words are alive. Beckett's heart clenched. This was the first time Wren had compared anyone to Celeste without sadness, like she was giving herself permission to like someone new. Later, after closing, Marlowe helped Beckett shelve returns. They talked about everything, the way people do when they've stopped being careful. You know what's the hardest part? Marlowe said, sliding a novel into place. It's not the exhaustion or the money. It's having no one to share the small moments with. When Uni learned to ride her bike, I wanted to turn to someone and say, "Did you see that?" But there was no one there. Beckett nodded. When Wren lost her first tooth, she was so excited. And I was excited too. But then I went to bed and just cried, because Celeste should have been there. She had this whole plan for the tooth fairy. Little letters she was going to write. They stood in silence among the shelves. Not awkward silence. The silence of two people who understood each other without needing to explain. But there were things they didn't talk about. Beckett didn't mention the letter from his landlord. Rent was going up 40%. He had run the numbers 15 different ways. There was no version where he could afford it. Holloway's Pages might have to close in 60 days. He didn't tell Marlowe because telling her felt like admitting defeat, and because part of him still thought, we're not really together. This isn't her burden. Marlowe didn't mention that Douglas and Vivian were still texting weekly. that they wanted a formal family dinner to meet Beckett properly, that the word custody had appeared in their messages more than once. She didn't tell Beckett because she didn't want to drag him deeper into her mess. They both kept their secrets and pretended everything was fine. The phone call came on a Tuesday. Vivian's voice was warm but insistent. "We're having a family dinner this Saturday. We want to meet Beckett properly. Douglas wants to make sure he's the real deal." Marlowe hung up and looked at Beckett with something close to terror. "They want us to come to their house for dinner, for an evaluation." Juniper, who had clearly been eavesdropping, burst into tears. "Mom, if you tell them you lied, they're going to be so mad. What if they really tried to take me away?" Wren wrapped her arms around Juniper. Beckett looked at the two girls, at the fear on Juniper's face, at the exhaustion on Marlowe's. "I'll go. We can handle one family dinner." "You don't have to do this," Marlowe said. "This is my mess." "It's not just your mess anymore." He stopped himself before he said the rest. "Not when I care about you this much," Wren whispered to Juniper, just loud enough for Beckett to hear. "This is going exactly according to plan." The two girls high-fived, and Beckett realized with a mixture of horror and amusement that he had been played by children. Saturday arrived too quickly. In the car on the way to the Thatcher's house, Wren appointed herself coach. "Dad, remember to hold Marlowe's hand and call her something cute. That's what boyfriends do." "How do you know what boyfriends do? You're in 3rd grade." Wren rolled her eyes with the full dramatic weight of an 8-year-old. "Dad, I can read. I've seen movies. Just trust me." Douglas and Vivian's home was everything Beckett expected. Manicured lawn, family photos covering every surface. So many pictures of a smiling man, who must have been Everett. The same smile Juniper had. Dinner was elaborate. The questions were relentless. Where did Beckett see the relationship going? Was he thinking long-term? Had he considered the responsibilities of potentially becoming a father figure to Juniper? Through it all, Juniper and Wren provided backup. "Mom smiles way more now," Juniper announced. "The real kind of smile, not the fake ones she does for other people." "My dad talks about Marlowe all the time at home," Wren added with the innocent expression of a practiced liar. After dinner, Douglas asked Beckett to step onto the back porch. The older man was quiet for a long moment, staring at the darkening sky. "When Everett got sick, we thought we had more time. The doctor said months, maybe a year. He was gone in 6 weeks." Douglas's voice was rough. "Cancer doesn't care about your plans." He turned to face Beckett. "Marlowe tried to be strong. For Juniper. For us. But we could see her struggling. That's why we've been so involved." He paused. "Maybe too involved." "I understand, sir. If you're stepping into that role, we need to know you're solid. That you won't bail when things get hard." Beckett took a breath. "Sir, I lost my wife 3 years ago. Celeste. Car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light." He swallowed hard. "She died instantly. I've been raising Wren alone ever since." Douglas stared at him. "You're a widower, too." It wasn't a question. "Marlowe doesn't know the details. We've been careful, not talking about the hard stuff." Douglas nodded slowly. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "Then you know what it's like. The weight of it." "Yes, sir, I do." When they went back inside, Beckett's eyes found Marlowe across the room. She looked back at him, questioning. Something had changed between them. Something neither of them could name yet. In the car driving home, the girls fell asleep in the back seat almost immediately. Marlowe was quiet for a long time. "I didn't know about Celeste. I'm so sorry." Beckett kept his eyes on the road. "It doesn't usually come up." "How do you do it? Move forward, I mean. Some days I still reach for my phone to text Everett, and then I remember. I don't know if I have moved forward. I still wear her ring. I still keep her pillow on her side of the bed. I just keep going. For Ren. Marlo looked down at her own ring. I can't take it off either. It feels like if I take it off, I'm admitting he's really not coming back. The car pulled up to Marlo's apartment building. Neither of them moved. Beckett, Marlo said softly, are we still pretending here? Because it's starting to feel like maybe we're not. The air between them shifted, charged. Beckett turned to look at her. In the glow of the streetlight, she was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. He leaned toward her. She leaned too. The space between them narrowed to inches. From the back seat, Juniper mumbled in her sleep. Mom and Beckett sitting in a tree. Kissing. They jerked apart like teenagers caught by a parent. Marlo laughed nervously. I should get her inside. Beckett helped carry the sleeping Juniper to the apartment door. Beckett, Marlo said, her hand on the doorframe, this thing we're doing, I don't know what it is anymore, but I'm glad it's happening. Me too, Beckett said. Definitely me too. He drove home with his heart pounding and his mind racing and the ghost of an almost kiss still tingling on his lips. The morning after the dinner, Marlo came by the bookstore. She found Beckett slumped over the counter, his head in his hands, a letter spread out before him. Beckett, what's wrong? He looked up. His face told her everything. She picked up the letter, read it. Landlord, lease not renewed, 60 days, 40% increase. Why didn't you tell me you were dealing with this? Beckett stood up defensive. Because we're not actually together, Marlo. This isn't your problem. The words hung in the air like a slap. Are you serious right now? Marlo's voice cracked. I thought after everything these past weeks, we were more than just two people pretending. Silence, then quieter. We are, Beckett said. At least for me, we are. I just didn't want you to think I was using this to ask for help. Marlo stepped closer, took both his hands in hers. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Asking for help isn't using someone. It's trusting them. She squeezed his fingers. We're in this together, real together, not pretend, okay? Beckett looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, at the woman who had walked into his life through the most absurd circumstances and somehow become the person he wanted to see every day. Okay. The phone call came 2 days later. Vivian's voice was ice. Marlo, we need to talk. Douglas and I are coming to the library in 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, they were in a private study room. Douglas and Vivian sat across from Marlo with expressions that made her stomach drop. We talked to Preston yesterday, Vivian said. He mentioned that Everett never talked about any friend named Beckett. Marlo's blood ran cold. We asked around town. Nobody has seen you two together before that lunch at the cafe. Douglas leaned forward. So I'm asking straight out, was Beckett real, or did you make him up to get us off your back? Marlo felt her carefully constructed world crumbling. It started fake, she whispered. Juniper ran into his bookstore and asked him to pretend. Because she was scared you were going to take her away from me. Vivian's hand flew to her mouth. She thought we would take her. Marlo was crying now. She heard you talking about custody arrangements. She heard you say I couldn't handle this alone. She's 7 years old and she's been terrified for months. The study room door opened. Beckett stood in the doorway, Ren behind him. Sorry I'm late. Ren told me where you were. And I'm not letting Marlo do this alone. He walked to Marlo's side and took her hand. Yes, this started as an act. A scared 7-year-old girl ran into my bookstore and grabbed my shirt and begged me to help her mom. And I said yes, because she was terrified, because I could see her mother was drowning, because I know what it's like to be judged for how you're handling grief. He looked directly at Douglas. But it's not an act anymore. Somewhere along the way, it became real. I love your daughter-in-law, and she is an incredible mother who has been doing an amazing job raising Juniper completely on her own. Vivian was crying. We never wanted to take Juniper away. We just lost our son. She's all we have left of Everett. We were so scared of losing her too. Douglas's voice broke. When Everett died, we didn't know how to cope. So we overcompensated. We told ourselves we were protecting them, but we were really just trying to control something because everything felt so out of control. Marlo sobbed. I thought you didn't think I was enough. I thought you were looking for reasons to say I was failing. Vivian crossed the room and pulled Marlo into her arms. Oh, honey, you're an amazing mother. Everett would be so proud of you. We just handled our grief so badly. We're so sorry. The door creaked open again. Juniper and Wren stood there, clearly having listened to everything. Juniper's small voice filled the silence. Grandpa, Grandma, I'm sorry I lied, but I was really scared. I don't want to live anywhere except with Mom. Wren took Juniper's hand. I don't want Junie to be scared anymore. She's my best friend. Juniper looked at the adults with eyes too wise for 7 years old. Maybe we can be both families at once. You can be my grandparents and Wren's grandparents, and Mr. Beckett can be part of our family. That way, nobody has to lose anyone. Silence filled the room. Then Vivian knelt down and gathered both girls into her arms. That sounds perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect. The library director appeared in the doorway. Cordelia Ashworth was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I couldn't help overhearing, Marlo, did I hear correctly that Mr. Holloway's bookstore is losing its lease? Beckett nodded, confused by the shift in conversation. The library has been wanting to expand our community partnerships, Mrs. Ashworth said. What if we created a local bookstore spotlight program? We could feature Holloway's pages at all our events. Recommend your store for book club selections. Host joint programming. She smiled. Independent bookstores are community treasures. We'd be honored to help keep yours alive. Douglas cleared his throat. I know some local business owners who might be interested in sponsoring events. Let me make some calls. Beckett stared at the man he'd thought of as an adversary. Sir, you don't have to. You protected my girls when you didn't have to. This is the least I can do. Later, after Douglas and Vivian had left with promises of Sunday dinners and better boundaries, Beckett and Marlo stood outside the library. Autumn leaves drifted around them like confetti. So, Marlo said, that was a lot. We went from fake dating to almost losing everything to gaining an extended family in about 2 hours. She laughed. A real laugh, the kind he'd been falling in love with for weeks. Story of my life lately. Beckett took her hand. Marlo, I know this started as pretend, but nothing about how I feel is fake. Nothing about how I feel is fake either. He stepped closer. I love you, and I don't love you because we both lost someone, or because our kids forced us into this, or because we understand each other's grief. I love you because of the way you read stories to my daughter, the way you organize books by color when you think no one's watching, the way you laugh at my terrible dad jokes, the way you're brave even when you're terrified. Marlo's eyes filled with tears, the good kind. I love you too. And I love Wren, and I love this ridiculous, chaotic, absolutely insane way we found each other. He kissed her then, for real this time. No interruptions, no sleeping children mumbling about trees, just two broken people finding something whole. Through the library window, Wren and Juniper watched. Finally, Wren breathed. Our plan worked, Juniper whispered. They high-fived. 6 months later, Holloway's Pages was still standing. The partnership with the library had brought in new customers. Douglas's business connections had helped with sponsorships. The community had rallied around the little bookstore on Main Street. On the day of the spring book fair, the shop was packed with families and children and the happy chaos of people who love stories. Beckett watched Marlowe move through the crowd, stopping to help a customer, laughing at something Juniper said, looking up to catch his eye and smile. This was his life now, this beautiful, unexpected, second chance life. Marlowe wandered through the shelves, straightening books out of habit. She stopped in the children's section, where a particular shelf caught her attention. The books were arranged strangely, not by author or title, but by something else entirely. She looked closer at the spines. Marlowyoumarryme. Her hand flew to her mouth. Beckett was beside her then, down on one knee, a small velvet box in his hand. I spent 3 weeks finding books with the right letters, he said, voice shaking slightly. Ren and Uni helped, although they wanted to add finally at the end. Marlowe was laughing and crying at the same time. This is the most us proposal ever. Is that a yes? Ren and Juniper appeared from behind a bookshelf, holding a homemade sign covered in glitter and crooked letters. We already planned the wedding. You just have to say yes. Marlowe looked at Beckett, at the ring, at the two girls bouncing with excitement, at the life she never expected to have again. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The entire bookstore erupted in applause. 4 months later, they got married. Half the ceremony was held at the Salem Public Library, where they'd circled each other for years without knowing it mattered. The reception spilled over into Holloway's pages, where the story had really begun. Douglas and Vivian walked Marlowe down the aisle, a way of honoring Everett while embracing the future. On Beckett's side of the venue, a framed photograph of Celeste sat among white flowers. On Marlowe's side, Everett smiled from his own frame. They had both moved their wedding rings to chains around their necks, a way to keep the ones they lost close to their hearts while making room for something new. Ren and Juniper served as co-maids of honor in matching dresses. They argued cheerfully about who would hold the rings. I should hold them, Juniper insisted. This was my idea from the beginning. But my dad is the one who said yes, Ren countered. They glared at each other, then grinned. Fine, Juniper said. We'll both hold them. Deal. During the reception, Douglas stood to give a speech. His voice wavered, but he pushed through. 10 months ago, a 7-year-old girl ran into a bookstore with a crazy plan to save her mother, and a stranger said yes. That stranger became family. He raised his glass. Because that's what love does. It turns strangers into family, and broken pieces into something whole. Later, when the cake was cut and the dancing had begun, Juniper climbed onto a chair and made an announcement to the entire room. I told everyone my plan would work. I'm basically a genius. Ren immediately objected. It was my plan. I told Dad to say yes first. They stared at each other. Two small girls who had engineered an entire romance through tablet messages and strategic coincidences. Then Juniper smiled. Okay, fine. Our plan. Ren smiled back. Our plan. Beckett pulled Marlowe close on the dance floor. Did you know, she asked, that they were scheming the whole time? I suspected after about the 4th coincidental meeting. And you didn't stop it. He looked at her. At this woman who had walked into his bookstore through the most absurd circumstances and become his whole world. Why would I stop the best thing that ever happened to me? She kissed him. Around them, their families celebrated. Their daughters danced. Their future stretched out before them, full of possibility. In the children's section of Holloway's pages, Charlotte's Web sat on the shelf where Beckett had dropped it 10 months ago. The day a 7-year-old girl burst through the door with a crazy request that changed everything. Sometimes the wildest requests lead to the most beautiful answers. A little girl asked a stranger to pretend to be her mother's boyfriend and ended up giving two broken families something whole. Beckett said yes to a terrified child and found love he thought he'd lost forever. Marlowe let a stranger into her messy, complicated life and discovered that you can honor the past while embracing the future. Douglas and Vivian learned that protecting someone doesn't mean controlling them. And two 8-year-old masterminds prove that sometimes children see what adults are too scared to admit. Because the best love stories don't always start with romance. Sometimes they start with a desperate kid asking a stranger for one impossible favor. And sometimes pretend is just another word for not ready to admit it's real yet.